My name is Chet Bowling. I'm a member of the planning committee, and it is my pleasure, and I'm indeed honored and humbled to introduce the keynote speaker today for Open Lunch, Professor Suresh Narine, who is Director of the Institute of Applied Sciences and Technology in Guyana, and is also the Director of Trent University Center for Biomaterials Research, Ontario, Canada. I had the pleasure of meeting Professor Narine for the first time last night. However, his reputation goes before him. What I've heard is that we have this great guy running IESB here in Guyana. I will not read to you his bio as you all have it in your programs, and it might take a while because as Professor Narine has actually warned me, there's a lot more awards and honors that is not included in this bio. However, I would like to point out two things that I noticed in reading Professor Narine's bio. Is his ability over the years to combine science and business. I think that's important. As someone involved in business myself, I think that's a great achievement. For example, the number of patents, although it says 22 on the bio, is actually greater than 80, I'm told. Also, I know there's, due to his work, there are commercial applications related to biodiesel in Mabaruma. The second thing I noted in reading Professor Narine's bio was that, or I concluded, he has to be a hard worker. That's the only way that he could have all the successes that he's had and be chairs of so many different organizations, at the same time live in two countries and achieve what he's achieved. And I've always said, the key to success is always hard work. I'm quite sure that is definitely a trait of Professor. Professor Narine, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Professor Suresh Narine.
Ministers of Government, Vice Chancellor and Senior Administration of the University of Guyana, all the other dignitaries that my poor eyes can't discern, but more especially, members of the Diaspora. I wish to first of all thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at the conference, whilst at the same time questioning their wisdom in putting a guy who does chemistry and physics for a living to speak to you as your lunch entertainment. Questioning my own wisdom at the same time about getting in between Guyanese and their lunch. So I hope you'll indulge me. I do have a very large voice as I teach for a living. And I know that I'm on a timeline, but it's very dangerous to relinquish microphones to those that teach for a living. Sometimes they don't want to give it back. But this is a very special occasion. If you talk to almost everyone in this room, you'll hear that the engagement of the diaspora is something which is being formalized in this effort that is long overdue. Not only us, but everyone, almost every other country, has underscored the importance of its diaspora. In his immortal Gitanjali, Rabindranath Tagore referred to India's diaspora as likened to a banyan tree. In Guyana we call it the Tarzan tree. It's a tree that begins its roots in one soil, but throws roots into very diverse soils around it. and from those diverse soils gains sustenance. Tagore likened the diaspora to that tree because India has gained so much from having its sons and daughters incubate, educate, and gain experience in foreign soils. Like the banyan tree, it is important that we own our diaspora. It's absolutely important for cross-fertilization of ideas, of shared experiences, of know-how, that in this fledgling nation of ours, which is still an adolescent at 50 years old, we realize that those different perspectives are important. Those that have ever heard me speak knows that I'm like a broken record. I like to talk about a 1976 book that was published on the 1st of March 1976 by a fellow called Adam Smith. The name of the book, of course, is The Wealth of Nations. And Smith says emphatically that the wealth of nations revolves around the tripod of land, labor, and capital. Ladies and gentlemen, in Guyana, our land is now even more second to none because in 2020, we're about to harvest the first oil from that land. But it's also a land, let's not forget, that's replete with minerals, a land that has some of the most fertile soil serviced by freshwater resources that's second to none in this hemisphere. So the land part of the wealth of Guyana is something that is very difficult to argue with. The labor part of that tripod, however, is something that is very appropriate to discuss at this conference, and it's something that has been integral to our history. The reason that we enjoy the perspectives of 6 different ethnicities in this country is because of the interplay of labor and wealth. Let us not forget that you and you and you and your forefathers are here on these shores because of labor, because of the exploitation of labor. It is no accident that our entire history revolves around a history of the acquisition and harnessing of labor. And so our labor history has led to a particular type of labor. Our labor is an entrepreneurial labor. It is one of the reasons why so many of us reside outside of these shores. Our labor is also within the context of a world situation where there is a paucity of skilled labor. In Canada, where I make my second home, our birth rate is about 1.3. In order for us to maintain our competitiveness, we need to have a birth rate of about 2.6. So every time I speak to Canadians, I ask them to go home and do it for their country. We live in an archipelago of 16 million souls in the English-speaking Caribbean. We have a very fractured system of education. We have a massive exodus of our skilled labor, and the ABC countries, not Argentina, Brazil, and Guyana, by the way, but America, Canada, and Great Britain. You can go to the shores of these countries if you bring with you financial capital, or if you bring with you brain capital. It is the modern form of acquisition of labor. And those countries need our skilled labor because their birth rate is so low. The birth rate in Japan is negative. The birth rate in the United States lags about 0.7 from what it should be. The birth rate in Europe is so low that it's almost negative. The only place that has a surplus of birth is Southeast Asia and Africa. And in Africa, we have particular problems with the AIDS epidemic and an average education level of grade 3. This is a problem. In Southeast Asia, the booming business in those parts of the world, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, China, Thailand, is ensuring that the brains of Southeast Asia are staying at home. The brains and people of India are staying at home. So what is to happen to the Caribbean if we are to continue to export our labor? But are we to be so myopic as to imagine that an impassioned appeal from podiums across this country is going to reverse that exodus? Of course not. We've got to be clever. We have got to find ways of sharing that labor. We've got to find ways of enabling people to come and be able to be harnessed with effective mechanisms that allow us to share that labor in a way that appeals to the emotional aspects of being in their birthplace. So labor is extremely important. The other aspect, harkening back to Adam Smith, that is appropriate to discuss in this conference, is of course capital. The current state of capital, foreign direct investment, and I see the head of Go Invest here can probably help endorse what I'm saying, but the current rate of foreign direct investment in the Caribbean, we attract less than 0.03% of the entire FDI across the world. Less than 0.03%. In other words, this region lacks capital. Even as it bleeds its labor, it lacks capital. We have two sources of attracting capital. One is you, ladies and gentlemen. You've done remarkably well, and we, quite frankly, need your capital. We need your brains, we need your skilled hands, but we also need your capital. And later on in my address, I want to talk to you about why our pull for your capital might just be, so much more advantageous to the pulls for your capital in those parts of the world where innovation necessarily has to be incremental. Where innovation necessarily has to be incremental because of the carrying capacity of those countries. Our carrying capacity for innovation and technology is barely got a few drops in the barrel. And so the opportunity that exists here for your capital can be immense, even if the risks are commensurate, even if the risks currently are somewhat large. The rewards are high. So we need to somehow articulate what our opportunity is. There is, of course, always in events like these, the emotional pull. There is always Mabel Stringberry and Horstellan. There is always the Almond family live there. There's I like pepper pot. Of course, those things are important. Minister responsible for tourism will tell you that we shamelessly use those things. However, we need to establish what our reverse pull is. What is our reverse pull? Many of you are my age where you have children. Those children, for sure, are growing up as Americans, as Canadians, as French people, or wherever you've chosen to make your home. But I bet you every single one of your children have been asked, where are you from? I dare anyone who has children and lives in the spread out diaspora to tell me one of your kids that haven't been asked, where are you from? No matter how much you accomplish in this life, identity will continue to be the fulcrum of one's existence and one's value. And so it is very important for us to underscore to those children what their identity is. Identity is not synonymous with where you make your residence, but it's very important that identity form a part of who they are. Guyana has other points. If you are to take a walk down our manufacturing sector in this country, you will find a very barren landscape. Let us face some facts. In Guyana, we're mercantile in nature. We like to buy things and sell things. The Minister of Business can tell you, statistically, the amount of successful businesses that we have here is far outstripped in terms of earning capacity by the mercantile class. We have a challenge with manufacturing things. Yet, we have the potential of vast productivity because of our land and water equation. And speak, of course, of the agricultural and agro-processing sector. It is so simple when you think of the following equation. 16 million English-speaking people in the Caribbean spend $4.5 billion US annually in imported food. 4.5 billion US annually on imported food. And in Guyana, we cannot find markets for our rice. There is something seriously wrong with this equation. And I think what is wrong with this equation is a lack of entrepreneurial spirit and a lack of a culture of risk. A lack of a culture of risk. Of course, that brings with it very important questions, such as in our country, we lack a landscape of crop insurance. When you grow crops, of course, elsewhere you have crop insurance. So then, why is that an opportunity as opposed to a challenge? Why is it that our insurance landscape doesn't see the attraction of business related to crop insurance as an opportunity? Sometimes it takes having the conversation in order for people to see that opportunity. Many of you will take advantage on Thursday and you will fly over this nation. It takes as much time to fly from Ogle to Paramakatoy or Aramatang on the border in Brazil as it does to fly to Trinidad. And as you fly, sit next to a window and look at how massive this country is. There is something that you need to do. Sit on the banks of the Essequibo. Go to Iwakrama, sit at the water's edge, and listen to the gurgling tale that relates its passage along the ankles of the Green Heart from the massive heights of Narine. And when you do, contrast that with that minus 50 day in Alberta, Canada. Contrast it with a cold, gray, slushy day on Liberty Avenue in New York City. And tell me about the pull. Tell me about quality of life. And tell me, isn't it worth trying to have the best of both worlds? Now we're about to pump oil and gas, and there are going to be, for sure, tremendous opportunity. The second source of that capital paucity that I spoke about, second source to replenish it, of course, is the oil and gas industry. But birthright is an important thing. Your voices on where we go, how we traverse this journey, is going to be important. I know for sure that the answer can't be that we'll cut everybody a check. And certainly the answer is not that everyone in this room or in this country will be employed by oil and gas. But as a source of capital injection, this represents a singular opportunistic moment in this country's future. It represents a one-time opportunity to get it right so that we can develop our sustainable industries. But we are not going to be able to develop those industries without your help. You know, I have been involved in the creation of a very simple piece of technology, a rice cereal plant that makes morning breakfast cereal. It's taken us 2 years and counting in this country to actually get that project into markets and on shelves. Yes, there are challenges, but the return on investment that's projected for that project is about 37%. The last time I checked my portfolio, I was barely managing to get 8% on my money, and I can tell you that I'm a clever financial man. Any of you out here in the diaspora getting more from your mutual fund? Yes, it takes risk, but the side benefit are trips to Iwakrama. The side benefit is to have your children belong somewhere. The side benefit is that you don't have to fight a carrying capacity, but you can take quantum leaps in this country because we're so far behind. I thought I should mention a little bit my experience, if it might be of some comfort to some of you. I have actually been living the half-in, half-out existence. I know Ken Dans wrote a little piece to some of us talking about the come back to go back mentality. Ain't nothing wrong with that, you know. Ain't nothing wrong with coming for a little bit of comfort and home and helping a bit and going back. But I've been living this existence for nearly 15 years. That's about a third of my lifetime. I've served 3 presidents. And yes, I've dealt with the opaque bureaucracy that Guyana can present. My experience has not been an experience that has been halcyon. It hasn't been an experience that has been pleasant. I fight with people all the time. Minister Gaskin and I choose every opportunity we get to fight with each other. But it's worth fighting. This country is worth fighting for. It is worth fighting for a vision. One of the things that I've managed to do in this country and why I think I've managed to survive is I have blatantly ignored the thing, a big elephant that sits in this room that we never talk about at conferences like these, but which is killing us, is race.
Yes.
This country has a crippling obsession with race. Crippling. It also has a crippling immaturity with respect to politics. Now, I don't care who you vote for, and I don't want to know. I do not want to know. You should be able to vote for whomever you want, but we should be able to extract out of you the responsibilities of being a good citizen. We need to learn this in this country. We need to learn this. We've just had a change of government. And all of us here are comfortable to ignore all of the things that this society is grappling with. You can't solve it if you ignore it, you know. I can't send my children, I don't give my children time out. Because time out means that daddy don't want to deal with the problem. We need diaspora conferences like these needs to talk about race. Why black people and Kuli people and Chinese people can't get along. Why? And why is it so linked to politics or acceptance in society? We need to talk about it. Because after all, we are mature people, aren't we? Look at this room. There are more letters behind your names than anywhere else I've ever seen. So surely it's a conversation that we can have. I have seen some nasty things thrown around. And you know, my heart went out to you. Because you enable the dialogue to happen, which should happen. And then I saw some nasty missives being written about race at this conference. And my challenge to those people who feel that they're marginalized is short. Do not be reticent about your opinions. Speak them, we all know. Because, of course, there are some real problems in our society. Race, to me, is a preoccupation with spurious matters. There are communities in this country that are so poor that they have not seen a medic in 5 years. There are entire indigenous communities in this country that are being besotted by HPV, and nobody talks about it. We have real problems, ladies and gentlemen. Let us address those problems. Let us address those problems. One of the things that every human being hankers for is to matter. To have somebody say, that person matters to me. To belong, to matter, to be important. You can be important here because there's so much to do and so many people that would appreciate what you have to offer. I want to talk to you about a little bit of my experiences with the indigenous peoples. All of you, if you leave these shores without buying a bottle of Rupuluni essence, don't talk to me when you see me. Now, this is a product that is made by indigenous peoples. It's a cosmetic facial cleanser, and the product itself is quite unimportant. What is important is the experience that we've had about the product, where you can have people of living in the hinterland who have learned to exist in the hinterland, who've learned to be beautiful in the hinterland, because place matters. Place is fundamentally important to all of us. And let me digress a little bit. Every one of us, our ancestors, are from different places. We're all indigenous to somewhere else. And each of us brings solutions from those places on how to be happy, how to have community, how to govern, how to be beautiful, and how to be healthy. And if we recognize that those differences from those different places affords us 6 different toolboxes of solutions for our problems, we actually might find that this kaleidoscope of colors in our country is a blessing rather than a problem. So place matters, and the indigenous peoples of our country have figured out how to live in their place and be beautiful. And the Rupununi Essence project, which we've done, harnesses that knowledge. It harnesses this remarkable 7,000 years of indigeneity, applies modern science, and created a remarkable product. In 10 months, this is not remarkable sales, but for Guyana, it's really remarkable. 10 months, we are now up to $8 million of sales, and it shows no signs of abatement. And every single cent goes back to the indigenous peoples. So buy one before you leave. I wanted to talk to you more about other projects, but you can see these on the website. Perhaps the message is more important than, a laundry list of things that I've been involved with, fortunate to be involved with. But perhaps let me try to end on the nature of engagement. I think one of the ministers, I can't remember which one, touched on this. Engagement should be appropriate. And let me explain, the word appropriate is very, very loaded, right? Yan Carew, how many people know who Yan Carew is? Let me share. But this is a shame, big shame. How many people have heard of the book Black Midas? Big shame, you all gotta buy a copy of Black Midas before you leave too. In Black Midas, there's a story which the departed Mr. Carew will, I'm sure, forgive me for repeating, but for paraphrasing, really. The story was being told to the main character in the book by an old elder. And it's about this mythical village which had done extremely well in its place of existence, but had found, much like many of you will find in North America and Europe, that the carrying capacity of its place had begun to become saturated. And so the village knew that it had to reach beyond its shores for innovation, for inspiration, for culture and growth. And so the village would send 3 of its best young men, brightest, most physically able, and they would send them up the mountain. And these young men for years would come back with rocks clasped in their hands after having gone as far as they could. And the village continued to prosper, and the village continued to do well because of the inspiration brought from the distant lands that the young men went. And then there came one year, 3 young men went, and the handsomest, the most able, the most elegant, the most charming, the best the village has ever produced, went furthest than everyone else, went to the top of the peak and found snow, and brought back a handful of snow. And of course, when they pried open his fingers, because he of course collapsed from exhaustion from his long journey, there was nothing in his hand. And as a boy, I read this story and was perplexed. Didn't know what it meant. I still am sure I don't know what Mr. Carew meant. But I think in the context of what we're discussing here, it's about appropriateness. We don't need snow, ladies and gentlemen, in Guyana. We need appropriate engagement. Don't come and tell us that you want to create the heights of technology simply because that's what you know. Come and take effort to modify what you offer here to be consonant with the needs and capacities of this country. It is important to be thoughtful about engagement. It is important to respect what is there. And yes, it's also important to challenge. But let us be appropriate. Let us be thoughtful. We need you. We need your sensitivity. We need your emotional intelligence. And we need all of you to be cultural diplomats. All of you. It is said, I always say this, when the level of the water hole drops, the animals look at each other differently. The level of the water hole in this country has been low for a long time. But as we begin to anticipate its rise, let us remember the common humanity that has allowed us to be together for so long. For the rest of this, and I'm very thankful that IBLAW has given me this opportunity to speak at the beginning of the conference, because for the rest of this conference, I want to ask you that you remember that difference is value. Shared experiences is value. Don't look to sit at a table where everybody agrees with you, because you're wasting your time. You could have done that in a basement in Liberty Island. Come here and enjoy our sunshine and talk about differences. I wish you all the very best for a successful conference. And once again, congratulate the University of Guyana for taking this important step towards harnessing one of our most important jewels, our diaspora. Thank you.